So in Chapter 5, we have been looking at linear equations, and so far we've learned 3 different types of linear equations. And today we're going to learn how to convert between the different forms. Now, you've kind of already done that, but we're going to formalize it today in this lesson. So just as a quick review, you know that we've learned the slope-intercept form, and the slope-intercept form looks like this. Y equals mx plus b. M is the slope, b is the beginning point, or the y-intercept. And then we learned the point slope form. That's the form that uses a point and the slope, and it looks like this. Y minus the y coordinate equals m times x minus the x coordinate. And the final form that we've looked at is the standard form. Standard form is ax plus by equals c. Remember, all of the x and y variables go on the left, the number goes on the right. So I'm going to give you 2 examples. The first one, we're just going to look at how to convert to the slope-intercept form. That means we're going to make the equations look like this. Each of these 2 examples I give you has 2 parts. So just make sure you write down example 1, a and b, and example 2, a and b. So in this first equation, you have a point slope equation that we want to convert to the slope-intercept form. We want to make it look like this. The slope-intercept form is always y equals. So your job in this equation and in the second equation is to just get it to look like y equals. So if it's given in point slope form, we're going to start out by distributing the 3. Now you've done this before. We did this in example previous. So you distribute the -3. -3 times x is -3x. -3 times 3 is -9. And then on the left-hand side, it's y minus 6. After you've distributed, then you're going to get rid of the -6 on the left-hand side by adding 6 to both sides. Those 6's cancel. You're left with y equals -3x. -9 plus 6 is -3. And that's it. So the steps when you have a point slope equation are first distribute, then get rid of the number on the left-hand side, and you have it written in slope-intercept form. The second example, you're given an equation in standard form, and you have to write it out in slope-intercept form. The goal is still the same. You want it to be y equals. This one's a few more steps. So in this problem, you're just going to solve for the y variable. You want to get the y all by itself on the left-hand side. So to do that, the first step is to get rid of the 3x. To get rid of a 3x, you subtract 3x. What you do on the left-hand side, you do on the right-hand side. 3x and -3x cancel. 17 minus 3x is just 17 minus 3x. Those are not like terms. You can't add them together. What's left on the left-hand side is -5y. Don't forget the negative. You've got the y all by itself, but you don't want -5y, you want just y. So to get rid of this -5 times y, you divide by -5. Those 5's cancel, you're left with y equals. Now what you do on the left-hand side, you have to do everywhere on the right-hand side. So you divide this by -5 and this by -5. And you can just keep it like that. 17 divided by -5 is -17 divided by 5. -3 divided by -5, a negative divided by negative is positive, and just keep the fraction. And that's it. Now, it's written with y equals. If you want it to be super technical, you could switch the x term around and rewrite it like this. Y equals 3/5 x minus 17/5, so that it looks like y equals mx plus b. Either of these answers is okay. All right, example 2, we're going to switch to the standard form. So we're going to convert both of these equations to the ax plus by equals c form. And remember that a, b, and c all have to be integers, and that a has to be a positive number. It can't be negative. So again, this first equation is given to you in point slope form. Your job is to get the x and the y on the left-hand side, all the numbers on the right-hand side. So first step, like before, is distribute the negative 2/3 or distribute the negative outside the parentheses. You get negative 2/3 x. Negative 2/3 times 6. 2 times 6 is 12. Divided by 3 is 4, so that's minus 4. Now you want all the numbers on the right-hand side, so you could do this in any order. I'm going to get this minus 3 on the left over to the right by adding it. I add 3 here, add 3 here. Negative 4 plus 3 is negative 1. So by adding the 3, now I've got an equation that looks like it's in slope-intercept form. Now I have to go a step further and get it into standard form. To get it into standard form, I'm going to add 2/3 x to both sides to get the x and the y on one side. 2/3 x plus y equals negative 1. Almost finished. I have the x and the y over on the left-hand side. I have the numbers on the right-hand side. Only problem is 2/3 is not an integer. So to make 2/3 an integer, I have to get rid of the denominator, which is a 3. So I multiply the whole equation by 3. I multiply the 2/3 by 3. I multiply the y by 3. I multiply the negative 1 by 3. When I multiply 3 times 2/3, the 3 and the 3 cancel. I'm left with 2x. When I multiply the 3 times y, I get 3y. And when I multiply the 3 times negative 1, I get negative 3. Now I have it written in standard form, ax plus by equals c. Okay, that equation was the hardest of the two. The second example, it's written in slope-intercept, which is this step right here. So in the second part, I just have to get everything on the left and then make sure they're integers. So to start this equation, I'm going to move this 1/2 x over to the left-hand side by subtracting 1/2 x from both sides. When I do that, these cancel, and I'm left with negative 1/2 x plus y equals negative 5 over 6. So I have the x and the y on the left, the numbers on the right. Only problem is they're not all integers, and the first term is negative. So I could do this one step at a time. I'm just going to multiply everything by negative 1. And that way my first term becomes positive. Negative 1 times negative 1/2 is positive 1/2. Negative 1 times y is negative y. And negative 1 times negative 5/6 is positive 5/6. Now my last step is to make sure that there are no fractions in the problem. And I can do that by looking at all of the fractions and finding a common denominator. The common denominator between 2 and 6 is 6. So I'm going to multiply the whole equation, both the left and the right, by 6. On the right-hand side, 6 times 5/6, the 6 will cancel. I'm left with 5. On the left-hand side, when I multiply 6 times y, I get minus 6y. When I multiply 6 times 1/2 x, 1/2 of 6 is 3. And that's it. Now, these problems are probably most difficult for most students because there's a lot more work involved. But just follow each of the steps. Just remember you're trying to get everything on the left that is an x and a y, and everything on the right that's a number. All right, now I'm going to give you the chance to practice that by completing some problems in your OneNote notebook.